Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of October 3rd, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Franciac, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Carter.
Present.
Mr. Young. Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Carter.
I move that we excuse Mr. Young, and he should be back next week.
Seconded.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Carter, second by Ms. Hubick to excuse Mr. Young. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, we're on to item 3, announcements and committee reports. Just a couple quick announcements from me. Trestle update. We haven't gotten the ATF final investigative report. We should get that this week, but nothing to update further on the investigation. As far as getting the trestle repaired and restored, we are in the process of submitting our permits to various federal, state, and local agencies, and the staff is lining up to order some supplies because we're worried about some of the supply chain issues. Primarily, we need decking, lumber, and fencing, and all of those are in high demand. So we'll hopefully get that on order so we can restore it as soon as possible. Parks and Rec will plan on opening parts of the closed trail in the coming weeks, hopefully sooner than weeks, to allow for better access to essentially for it to be a pier, but we'll keep it a safe distance from the damaged area. So I know we have it blocked off right where the land meets the water, so we're working to move that out so we can at least enjoy some of the trestle. We continue to receive many generous offers from the community to help rebuild the trestle, and again, for those looking to donate right now, you can visit the Anacortes Parks Foundation website. Also this weekend, Chamber of Commerce sponsors the Beer on the Pier event. So that's Friday 5 to 8, Saturday 12 to 3, and 4 to 7 on Saturday. So that's Beer on the Pier at the Transit Shed. And I don't have any idea of how much they have sold. So if you're interested, get your tickets early. All right. Finance Committee, I believe, met before this meeting. Anyone with a Finance Committee report? Mr. McDougall.
We pushed the Finance Committee meeting.
Okay. Well, good to know. Thank you. And Public Works Committee was also moved till next week. Any other announcements or committee reports? Okay. We are on to item 4, which is public comment. It's your opportunity to comment on anything that is not on the agenda for tonight, because we do have a couple public hearings, one with budgeted revenue sources and a moratorium for ordinance 4031 and capital facilities plan. So if you're not commenting on any of that, you can come on up, and I've got a list of 4 folks that have signed up already. And first on the list, Megan Shore. Public safety and health is the topic, and again, 3 minutes, and if you're going to repeat the topic, feel free to say you agree and let the council know, but 3 minutes, and I think you know how the mic works there, and you got to get the make the blue light turn on.
Green.
Green, blue, okay. Mine's blue. But
I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak and be heard today. I also want to thank our Mayor, Matt Miller, and the mayors from Mount Vernon, Burlington, and Sedro-Woolley for addressing the concerns of each city with the letter they wrote to our Washington state lawmakers about the humanitarian crisis that is seeping into every town in Washington state. Did you know in Washington state you can walk out of a store with hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise, food, alcohol, really whatever you want? There is no penalty. You get stopped by the police if they come, may be arrested, but a misdemeanor is no longer a punishable offense in Washington. Employees of Safeway, Target, Dick's Sporting Goods, or Walgreens are instructed to let thieves leave the store without paying, and all they can do is call the police. Oh, and if the thieves are driving away as the police arrive, they can't pursue them. This is madness and a complete mockery of our social contract. What good comes to a society when police cannot pursue lawbreakers, or arrest a drug dealer for possessing illegal substances, or stop and question youth for inappropriate or suspicious behavior? The laws created by our Washington state lawmakers are not protecting citizens. They are protecting criminals, they are protecting drug addicts, they are protecting thieves. They are protecting the bad guys in order to claim some sort of perverse moral virtue that I simply can't understand. What is the incentive to get a job and engage in society if you can steal things without penalty? What is the incentive to take responsibility for your actions if the law protects thieves and vagrants more than productive citizens and business owners? What is the incentive for police to enforce the law when they are not able to arrest people for crimes and only stand to be vilified if they try? This is a crisis. How can we incentivize our city council to help the mayor by creating city codes that protect citizens from this evolving humanitarian crisis? This is a crisis of litter, of raw sewage, of hypodermic needles, and lawless individuals who seem to have more rights than the people who contribute to the economy of this town, who contribute their time to this town. We want our mayor, and we want you, the Anacortes City Council, to help us. As citizens and council members, we need to write Lovelet, Rommel, and Lekanoff to ask that they take action. We want change, and this is where it begins. Our collective goal should be to put money towards staffing jails, funding mental institutions, and creating low-income housing for families and recovering drug addicts to take responsibility for their lives and their actions. We should encourage them to be citizens doing their part to enhance the community rather than detached individuals who degrade it instead. Change will happen if we begin to demand it. This isn't about political partisanship or liberal versus conservative values. This is about common sense and true compassion. Letting this problem continue to fester hurts everyone, especially the homeless. Please protect Anacortes and all the cities in Washington by demanding that our lawmakers make the change. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Cody Hart signed up next, and it's elections and sheriff, the topic. And if you could state your name again, and we only ask that you don't have to give your address, but where you live, city.
Yeah, Cody Hart, Cedar Woolley, Washington. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Last week, I contacted the council via email and notified them, a number on the phone and then others through just email, of who I was. I'm a Skagit County resident. I am a veteran of the United States Navy, and I'm an independent reporter who has been an advocate for election integrity across Washington State for the last several years. What I sent you specifically were two articles, interviews with the Skagit County Election Office, the first, Gabriel Clay, in which she admitted that the election office in this 2022 August primary had locked election observers out of the election, had misinformed them of the times that they would be processing election ballots, and had confirmed that they had processed ballots at undisclosed hours prior to any of the public knowing. I also sent you another video interview with a conversation with a Skagit County Sheriff's representative, Mr. Wiggins, speaking on behalf of Sheriff McDermott and Prosecuting Attorney Wyrich, in which it was confirmed that the position of the Skagit County Sheriff's Office is that they will not investigate election crimes in Skagit County any longer. They informed me to refer, and that they would be referring people to the Washington State Attorney General's office. As an election integrity advocate, I have heard this many times in the past, and I made sure to point out in the election interview that the Washington State Attorney General's office does not conduct investigations through citizen referrals. This is a dead end. This is what we call obstruction of justice in the state of Washington. The election system, auditor's office, and the Skagit County Sheriff's Office contract with the city of Anacortes consistently through interlocal agreements. You are representatives of the community of Anacortes, and as such, I am notifying you that they have breached their contract and will be doing so in the future unless you as council members do something to legally act against them. The video articles are conclusive. You, again, have a choice, and that is why I'm here. And I informed you prior to showing up I would be doing this. I will be allowing you the opportunity to inform your constituents on what side of this issue you are on. If you believe that we should have integrity in our election systems, if observers should be locked out of the election system, and if we accept a sheriff that will not enforce the fundamental laws of our election system, you will be held accountable by your constituents, and I encourage you to tell them out loud your opinion on this. This is not political. This is about our Constitution. This is about being a democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next, I've got a Jeff Ziegler, or Ziegler. I'm sure you'll help me with, make sure I get it right. And
Hi, yes.
Pub-
Jeff Zeiger.
Zeiger, sorry. I put an L in there that didn't belong, and it's
No.
the subject is public lands encroachment.
No troubles. Yeah, I live in the Cap Sante neighborhood of Anacortes. Yeah, my current concern is with the encroachment of public access land between Fifth Street and Cap Sante Park. I agree with the comments made by my friends and neighbors at the past few public sessions, and will simply add that waiting over a decade for action after sending an encroachment notice is more than enough time. I reiterate our prior neighborhood request the city set and enforce a deadline in the near future so that this doesn't continue to drag on for months and years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John Campbell, public lands encroachment. Oh, okay. Anybody else that maybe came in late that would like to address the council during our public comment period? And looking for hand raised. Sometimes forgetting we have attendees online. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda, items 5A, B, and C. Council.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Walters.
I'd like to pull item 5C.
5C, okay?
Mayor Miller,
Mr. McDougall.
I move to approve items A and B.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Mr. Carter to approve items A and B on the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 5C, and I know staff is ready to address any questions that might come up, but Mr. Walters, item 5C. Contract award, W.T. Preston deck recoding.
Yeah, the proposed contract here is for $67,553 and some change to recoat the deck on the W.T. Preston, the stern wheeler that we've got down there by the depot. I just wanted to highlight this item because the amount is $67,553.92. It's a substantial amount of money for this item. It's got to be done or we'll lose the asset. But the amount is $67,553.92. And so I move approval of the contract as proposed for $67,553.92.
Seconded.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Walters and a second by Ms. Hubick to approve the contract award W.T. Preston deck recoding. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to item 6. This is a public hearing, or these are public hearings. Our first one is item 6A, a public hearing on the 2023 budgeted revenue sources. This is a discussion item and open for comments from the public. And I haven't dragged it out enough for you to get set up, Steve, but I know you're ready to go.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. The We'll just take a few minutes to go through the revenue development for the 2023 budget. Just a couple of things that I wanted to point out, so I have some kind of background, overall background information. There are a number of indicators in the economy right now that suggest a slowdown is possible, so we did take a conservative approach when developing the 2023 resources. For the state shared revenues, we have significant shared revenues, and MRSC develops a revenue calculator every year. We use that, and there's a screenshot of it a little bit later. The three major tax revenue streams, sales tax, property tax, utility tax, make up about 75% of our tax revenues. We used historical collections and tried to temper that expectation with what we think may be happening in the next upcoming year with future receipts. Utility revenues we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide, but we did consider current consumption trends against scheduled increases. So for the utilities, in the water utility in particular, we've been seeing about 4% growth per year over the last couple of years. It's been a little bit of a bumpy history the last several years with COVID quarantines, but we believe that's a reasonable expectation. So that was incorporated into both our water expectations and sewer expectations. The sewer consumption is calculated off of water consumption. The wastewater utility, I would remind council, in 2020, a schedule of rate increases were adopted by City Council, which total 7%, and at the same time there was a shift of service element in that cost structure that was put into place. So the overall increase is 7%, but single-family residences will see a 3.5% increase. It's different for non-single-family residents, but it's just so council is aware that rate study that was put into place, there was a 2% CPI that was assumed in developing those 7% increases over the next several years. So if the CPI that we're currently seeing continues, that could create issues that we'll keep track of in the coming years. The other three utilities have no rate increases, but do have CPI increases, which is effective for the 2023 rates, and that's based on the October 2022 Seattle-Tacoma CPI. The tax revenues, this is that shared revenue calculator that I was referring to that MRSC develops. We use this every year. It's pretty consistent, it's pretty accurate. It's based on per capita distribution. So the sum of these different shared revenues illustrated here, $657,000. We'll look into each of these major tax revenues at a detailed level. So again, the city's three largest tax revenue streams, these are unrestricted tax revenues for the general support of the city: property tax, sales tax, and utility tax. And utility tax is made up of two revenue streams: the utility tax on public utilities, which are city-owned utilities, and private utilities, which are natural gas and electricity. So this is a look in total at those three revenue streams, looking back over the last several years. And I know it's a little bit busy, I apologize for that, but you can see this first column here is property tax, the second column is sales tax, the third column are total utility tax, and then on the right side, the percentages is the change from year to year, and the column corresponds to the column of the tax revenue. So in 2016, in property tax, there was a 2.9% increase over the property tax to the prior year. Sales tax that same year in 2016, 8.9% increase. Utility tax, 4.2% increase. So dropping down to what we're budgeting for 2023, we have $5.6 million in property tax, $5.9 million in sales tax, $4.6 million in utility tax. And the change for each of those, property tax is a 1.8% increase. So that's based on assuming there's 1% property tax increase authorized by City Council. That's factored into that number. And then we're assuming an additional, I believe it's 70,000 in new construction to be added to the tax rolls, gets us to 1.8%. Sales tax, we projected, well, sorry, move on to the detailed slides. I'll talk about those as we go. So again, property tax, it's limited to 1% per year increase, and that's based on the budget. And the budget is the levy, so the actual levy collection budget. Those terms are used interchangeably. And the millage is calculated based on what the total valuation of the city assessments are and the actual property tax levy. So for 2022, we don't have the assessments for 23 yet. So 2022 actual valuation of 4.7 billion against the property tax levy of 5.5 million gives us a millage of $1.16 per thousand of assessed value. So again, new construction is added to the tax rolls on top of the 1%. We assume a 99.5% collection rate when we establish the property tax revenue stream. Sales tax. So this is one of our largest and, again, most important revenue streams. And kind of we've talked about this in the past, but as a reminder, so the retail sales tax includes purchases that are delivered to the city of Anacortes. So if you make a purchase out of town, say over in Burlington or Mount Vernon, if you have it delivered to Anacortes, then that sales tax comes to the city of Anacortes. Likewise, online sales, if it's delivered to the city of Anacortes, those online sales will generate sales tax for the city of Anacortes as well. In 2018, you see the big jump from 4.4 million to 5.8 million. That's when the high school project took place. Construction, both residential and commercial construction, is one of our largest sales tax generators. And then you see the drop in 2020 when we had the COVID activity, and then 21 it bounced back significantly at 5.5 million. So what we're looking at right now, we're projecting 6.2 million for 2022, and that's based on actuals through July, looking at historical norms and assuming that those historical norms maintain through the end of the year. That would put us at 6.2 million. We are budgeting 5.9 million for 2023 for sales tax. That's a 5% decrease of the projected 2022 balance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if that doesn't make sense or... Okay, so utility tax, mentioned this a little bit ago. The utility tax is made up of both private and public utilities. So the private utilities are natural gas, electricity, cable TV, and commercial solid waste. The residential solid waste is a city function, but commercial solid waste, the vendors can choose a different vendor if they like. So those are the private utility tax generators. Public utility tax, the four utilities that the city runs. So you can look over the last several years. Our public utility tax, and this is it's the public utility tax is 7% on the city utilities, it's 6% on the private utilities, and those are outlined by statute. The private utility tax rates are limited by statute. So looking at the private, you can see, I have to thank Ms. Moulton for this. So the numbers look a little bit crazy in 2017 and 2018. Prior to 2017, we commingled private and public utility tax into the same revenue stream. So we broke that out into 2017 partway through the year. So that's why it's incomplete data. It's fine for looking at the total, but that's why the two revenue streams look funny like that. So, but looking from 2018 and on, the public utility tax, you can see increasing year to year very, very nicely for us from from my finance perspective at least. The private utility tax, a different story. You can see the total of 2.1 in 2018, dropped to 2,027,000, then to 2,011,000. It was back up a little bit last year, but you can see even with the little bit of a bump in 2021, it's still less than we collected in 2018. This year, the private utility tax collection has been up pretty significantly, and that's because the cost of natural gas and electricity have increased significantly. So we, again, looking at July actuals, are projecting 2.3, almost 2.4 million in public utility tax, almost 2.3 million in private utility tax. We double check the metrics for utility tax. The private utility tax, we're projecting for 2023 a 5% decrease off of the 2022 collections, and on the public side a 5% increase off of the 2022 projections. So overall that puts us, when you look at the bottom line, a 0.1% increase in 2023 over what we're projecting in 2022. So the total of those big three, projecting 16.1 million for the 2023 budget, which is off of the projected 2022 at 16.3. So overall, down about 208,000 across those three revenue streams, or about 1.3%. So again, the public hearing tonight requires consideration of a potential 1% property tax increase. That 1% increase is assumed in the property tax numbers here. So when we come back the first week of November is when we're scheduled to look at ordinances. That would be one of the things I'll be asking council to consider, is the ordinance to adopt a 1% property tax increase.
Are you ready for questions?
Yep, happy to answer any questions you might
So
have.
I always like to comment here. I'm always amazed that the finance director has to have a crystal ball and to figure out the future. And in this case, I think the crystal ball, somebody else is holding it. So that's a little bit even more of a challenge. But I think these numbers are pretty good projections. So any members of the public want to comment on this? This is a public hearing. All right, council, questions from Mr. Hoagland.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. I had a quick question, kind of just a clarifying question on millage, essentially. If we could go to slide 6. So the millage number is basically call it, it peaked in 2014 at $1.79 per $1,000 of property value. And then this year, we're targeting like $1.16 per $1,000 of property value, correct?
Yes, that's right. So the millage it's a tricky number. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and I still don't really understand how the property tax elements work. But it's based on valuation and actual property tax levy. But it's but the millage indicates that it's on a per thousand basis calculation. So the total valuation here, this middle column, if we drop down to 2022, it's $4,785,000,000. That's the total valuation of the properties in the city of Anacortes. So if you take that 4.7 billion, divide it by 1,000, that gets it down to 4.7 million. You divide that by 5.5 million, our actual levy, and that's what the millage is. So then the millage is what's used to assess your property tax, the property tax that you pay on a per thousand basis. So if you have a $500,000 home, or a home that assesses at $500,000, divide it by 1,000, gets you to 500. If you multiply that 500 by the $1.16, that gets you the city tax rate that you owe for your property.
Got it. So just looking at this table, this is going to be really rough numbers, but basically you know, the average property in Anacortes over the last 10 years has probably gone up in value by 50, 60%. However, the property tax against that property has gone up by 10%.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's why that's why the millage rate keeps dropping as assessed values increase. The assessed values are increasing faster than the levy rate is increasing, so that millage is getting smaller.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for clarifying.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters, and then I think Ms. Cleveland.
I thank Mr. Hoagland for the presentation. There's some good numbers in here, some good charts. If you look at property tax, the 2016 amount of revenue for just our property tax revenue was 4.7 million. And if you take that 4.7 million and you put it into an inflation calculator, 4.7 million in 2016 should buy about 5.9 million in 2022. But you see that our 2022 property tax revenue is only 5.5. And I think on a different chart, we actually had a slightly higher amount for the projection for 2023, but it's 5.6 because the difference between that 1% inflator that we're allowed to take just isn't very significant. And over that time period, the 2016 to 2022 time period, there's been a cumulative rate of inflation of 23.4%, just using the regular CPI, and we're taking 1% per year to try to keep up with inflation. But the costs of asphalt have not risen at 1%, and the costs of staffing has not risen at 1%. They're rising at rates faster than that. So we are getting further and further behind all the time in terms of the purchasing power of the tax levy that we're bringing in, especially in terms of property tax. Fortunately, sales tax is helping us catch up a little bit. But overall, our ability to bring in that property tax money is limited by inflation. And so we make this point every year in support of the 1% property tax increase, because real dollars over time are not what we're looking at here. We're looking at just the nominal dollars. And if you look at the real dollars, it's a much different picture. And the total amount that the city will bring in different on your other chart there, Mr. Hoagland, was 5.6 million versus 5.5 million. So about 100,000 different. Does that include new construction revenue, or is it just the 1% increase?
Yes, that's a good point. That 5.6 million, the 5,620, that includes estimated new construction. So that's actually the number that we used to for our 2023 property tax budget.
And we like that new construction because it brings with new revenue, but it also brings with it new costs, new demands for services. So we need to keep that all in mind as well.
Ms. Cleland.
It was just a quick clarification. So on the sales tax slide, you said that the 2023 is 5% below 2022's. Is it the budgeted or the projected?
That's projected.
Okay.
Yeah, so we use historical norms through our July actual collections to project out through year end.
So it'll be 5% below the 6.2 million?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we've got to pick a number for 2022, even though we don't have all of 2022 numbers yet, but at some point we got to pick one to plan to present to you all for the budget. Great question, though. Any other questions for Mr. Hoagland? We'll see him in a minute on the capital facilities update. All right, we will move on to item 6B, which is ordinance 4031, extending the moratorium on the acceptance of certain land use permit applications in the R4 use zone west of the commercial use zone that seeks to use the bonus height provisions of AMC section 1942.5050C. This is discussion with possible action. And Mr. Miesemer is setting things up to talk to you all.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council and the audience. Ordinance 403 would extend the moratorium on the acceptance of certain land use applications in the R4 use zone west of the commercial use zone. Proposing to use the bonus site provisions of AMC 19.42050C, which would allow an additional 10-foot above the 40-foot base height if the developer were building 25% of the multi-units, not more than 600 square feet. So the moratorium was first adopted in October 21, 2019, and extended several times due to COVID pandemic and various workloads and other actions that needed to be taken care of. City Council discussed several concepts at its June 27th, 2022 meeting, landing on 8 concepts to take back to the Planning Commission for review and public comment, and staff has not been able to take care of that as yet. Staff has been working with Makers Architecture on developing a housing action plan to address housing needs, and through that process, it was shown that since 2016, the average new units constructed is 101, and that 131 units are needed to meet the city's goals with the population allocation from the 2016 comprehensive plan. And so by that, the population allocation that was adopted by council through the comprehensive plan was 5,895 over the 20-year planning period. And so we're running about 30 housing units short right now. And as you can see from the memo in your packet from Makers, there's a little bit more information there, and including costs and what it takes for a person living in Anacortes to actually be able to afford the $700,000 house. And so the memo itself was something that through the Housing Action Plan process we thought would be good information to bring forward to the council. The Housing Action Plan is about, I want to say, 85% complete. And over the next few months, we'll be going to the Planning Commission, presenting that Housing Action Plan, and then, of course, through the City Council and through HACS and the Planning Committee as well. And so with that, City Council has a couple of options. Council can approve Ordinance 4031, and that would mean staff would come back within 60 days with a resolution and a work plan that would set forth what our hopeful plan would be to get that before the Planning Commission and the public to take a look at various concepts. The other is to just allow the moratorium to expire. And by that, the moratorium would expire October 11th. And so if the council decides that they want to move forward with extending that moratorium, tonight would be the best option. I say that only because I'm going to be out of town on October the 10th. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. We've got a lot of work left to do yet in bringing the Housing Action Plan forward to the Planning Commission and City Council. You know, the council, the Planning Commission, the public did a lot of really good work with the comprehensive plan and with the development regulations. And as a community, we're seeing a large variety of different styles of housing options available now. And that's just getting started, I think, over this past year. Hopefully that'll continue, and hopefully the Housing Action Plan is going to bring more alternatives before us. So with that, if I can help answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
All right, council, who's going to jump in first on this one? I think the packet kind of lays out the recommended motion and the alternative actions, kind of what Makers said, but obviously extending the deadline will give an opportunity to take it back to some of the options. We have 23 the 23 options that were presented before. I think we all found that was pretty unreasonable, so I think we're down to a few options at this point. But I apologize. I think we have a member of the public that would like to address the council on this public hearing. Ms. Pickett, glad to have you
Mayor Miller, council, and staff, nice to see you all. So I don't know that I have a strong opinion on the moratorium, only that I would like to speak in favor of the 5-story height. My address is 1112 18th, so I am just about half a block from Fidalgo Flats. And the big advantages to something like that are we're not using up farmland, we're not using up forest lands, we're not using the beach for housing. Not only that, but the folks who live there can probably get by with a good pair of shoes, maybe a bike, bus, and occasional Uber. So when you think that the cost of a car is like about $440 a month, this starts to look like a good option for people who are getting going. The other thing I thought was interesting, one of the younger people who commented earlier on in these hearings said that although 600 feet might not seem like a lot to you guys, she says, that's enough for me and 3 roommates. So I guess I know that the council faces a lot of opposition from my neighbors. I mean, I talk to them too. But I would think that anybody in favor of conservation and helping save the earth for the kids would take a really good look at the taller buildings. They conserve heat. They don't use as much energy. I mean, it's really not a bad thing at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. All right. Anybody else? Okay, council, over to you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I think it goes without saying almost, and to the extent it doesn't, I'll say it. We absolutely need housing in Anacortes. We need housing along Commercial Avenue. I'm supportive of height along Commercial Avenue, especially in our central business district, but elsewhere on Commercial. We need housing in our downtown for all the reasons Ms. Pickett just mentioned. And maybe most of all, we need options for housing. Small units, apartments, condos, things that are different than the really very homogeneous housing stock that we have elsewhere in town. I wrote this moratorium, however, to prevent a 5-story building that would be allowed all the way up to M Avenue, because integrating housing into our existing neighborhoods is important. 5-story buildings are not necessarily the way to do that everywhere in the R4 zone. So I support looking at the various options, the third ways that we have laid out here that we've spent some time on now, that would allow this height in some areas, but not everywhere throughout the R4 zone. So we just need to complete that process. To let this moratorium to expire now would break the faith with the public who have been reliant on the fact that we've had this moratorium, and they expect that there is a public process to follow here. I think a lot of them have been waiting for that public process for the last 2 years, and we just haven't moved it forward yet. So there is no other option, I think, for a city council to take except to move this moratorium forward, to keep it going until we have that public process. One of the potential outcomes of the public process is to do nothing and to let the moratorium then expire as part of that process. But the process is important. It's that interaction with the public and keeping faith with the public that is important. Now, as Mr. Miesmer mentioned, we were also simultaneously working on this housing action plan, which now the HACS committee has spent quite a good bit of time on. It takes a comprehensive look at our progress providing for housing for our community, and it will ultimately generate a proposed ordinance for housing options. And housing options include height. So it seems to me that resolutions for this moratorium ought to be just integrated into that process, and we've talked about it before. I think it would actually be strange for the city to pursue the moratorium resolution and then immediately follow it up with a broader discussion about housing options. We should just integrate that. So I'd suggest we we approve moving the moratorium continuation ordinance forward and direct the planning department to integrate that into the housing options process, so that it's a holistic look at it, and we talk about the need for height in some areas in the context of the need for housing throughout the city. If we don't get options for housing, we are going to persist in having a dysfunctional housing ecosystem here, where we can't provide the housing for the people that are integral to our community, to providing table service at restaurants and bedpan service in the hospital. We need people to have options for those, for all at all income levels, for housing. And this is part of the way there, but we need to do it right, and that means keeping this moratorium going so that we can have that process.
Thank you. Any other members of the council?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton?
Thanks. So yes, this is 3 years we've been doing this, and I'm probably not the only one running out of patience, but I think we're almost there. I agree with Mr. Walters that this should be part and parcel of the housing action plan, and what comes from that we discuss it as a whole. I just don't want to see this moratorium extended again after this. I don't know how we do that, if we say this is the last time, or if I'm just overreacting. But maybe it's just that we share the commitment that we need to get this done. And I think we have some good ideas on the table. So I agree that I think we need to, I think we need to tweak it a little bit. But I don't think we need to tweak it a lot. For instance, the R4, the bonus height maybe only goes up to N Avenue and not M, because when we think of the topography. Anyway, this is a conversation for another time, but I do think that we should have the conversation together, because we said we were going to.
Hey, Ms. Cleveland?
Thank you. So as the third member of the planning committee, as you can probably sense, we've had some heated discussions on how to handle this moratorium. And then also we've been privy to kind of the preliminary research and responses we've received from this housing action plan and recommendations. And I think anyone, if you haven't read it, should read the recommendation by makers that was included in the packet. I think that's it's one more kind of piece of the puzzle. And I hopefully, as I know, I'm sure Planning Commission will read it when they look at the R4 project, or the R4 zone and the 5-story, when they go through it. I think that we've all had, it's been good to have kind of a beat. We had some really passionate folks, and it made sense that the idea of a 5-story building was shocking to our community. We've now seen it built, and I think we're realizing that maybe we can make it work in conjunction with some townhomes and some, 3-story buildings and things like that. But that being said, as both Mr. Walters and Ms. Moulton said, I think it's incredibly important that the public is able to hear what the results of this housing action plan, the findings of it, and then also to be able to kind of discuss what needs to happen across our town, and have that bonus height incentive as part of that conversation. My inclination, and I'll show my cards a little more, I think it shows the importance of having that bonus height incentive for R4. But as we see some other housing types open up, this is something that we're going to have to absorb across the entire all of the residential zones in our community. So that being said, I think we do need to do one more renewal, but that this has got to be part of the Planning Commission, but I hope Planning Commission reads that memo. So that's where I'm at. And in that case, if I've got it here, I am happy to recommend to approve ordinance 4031.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Cleland McGrath, a second by Mr. Carter to approve ordinance 4031. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Franciac, would you take the vote, please?
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And yes, I did hear the council loud and clear. This is the last one. And we will work this through the process with the Planning Commission and with the maker's report, and I think provide a couple of reasonable options. So thank you for that debate. Moving on to other business, item 7A. This is an interlocal agreement with the Administrative Office of the Courts for the reimbursement agreement between the Office of the Courts and the City of Anacortes. And I think, Ms. Swetnam, you've got this one.
I have this one, yeah. Right. Thank you, Mayor Miller, members of council, members of the audience. I'm presenting this tonight, but really this is an agreement that comes out of the courts, and Ms. Shu is here on behalf of the courts. That's in the Administrative Services Department, but I thought I would give the background, and if there are questions, we can address them. So before I go into these slides, this is not a PowerPoint presentation, by the way, because these are somebody else's slides that Emily got from a webinar, but they did a better job than I probably would have, so we'll slip through those. But the background here is this agreement is a response to the case of State v. Blake, which came out of the Washington State Supreme Court in February of 2021. And essentially what that case did was it declared unconstitutional Washington's strict liability drug possession law. And so the implications of that are that there are a number of individuals who have been convicted of simple possession charges, and those convictions are now invalidated. Practically speaking, what that's looked like in a lot of the county court systems have been dealing with this is vacating those convictions, and in many cases reimbursing defendants for financial obligations that were associated with those convictions. So to the slides here, the Washington State Legislature has provided a bunch of money for municipalities. This was something that they did for county court systems last year. And this year there's $11,500,000, that makes more sense, to assist cities with costs of complying with the Blake decision. And so we'll talk about the contract a little bit in a second and how that could help us. There's also $10 million to establish a legal financial obligation aid pool for cities that have to reimburse defendants for their legal financial obligations. And so there are contracts that are presented to cities through the Administrative Office of the Courts, and that's what's been provided in your packet. And so there's a maximum amount set in the contract by jurisdiction. So in our case, the city is able to get reimbursement of up to $72,734, and that's for the city's costs in dealing with any vacations of convictions that come up. So that would be time for things like staff expenses, including my time, including court administration time, including finance department time. And so to get this reimbursement, there will be some tracking that has to happen on a staff level to deal with these issues. In addition to that $72,734, there's $62,816 that is reimbursable to the city for the legal financial obligation reimbursements. So that would be, a defendant who's convicted under one of these strict possession charges, had to pay money as part of their conviction. They're now able to get reimbursed. The city will pay them, and then we can get reimbursement for that amount through this agreement. So those are really kind of the high points that I wanted to touch on. I think Ms. Shue, Becky Welch, who is the court administrator, and I had a really helpful meeting with somebody from the administrative office of the courts. And I think the reality is that communities around the state are dealing with vacating these convictions. And this is an opportunity right now, when there's funding available, for the city to be able to get some of that work done and get reimbursed for that. So that's really all I wanted to present, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Ms. Shue is here as well if there are court-specific questions.
Council, questions? Yeah, Ms. Cleland.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just because I'm curious, how far back are people able to have these vacated? Do we know?
Oh, I'm not sure that there's a...
So, okay. And then also, is this, I assume it's the person who, the defendant has to go and kind of initiate this process?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think that's generally how it works. There would be a petition to vacate the conviction. But in our conversation with the administrative office of the court, she actually said that there were some jurisdictions that were proactively going through and trying to get these vacated while there was this reimbursement opportunity available. But that would be, up to Ms. Welch and Ms. Shue about staff availability and opportunity to do that.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
That tags on to my question, which is, have we done any estimation of whether the amount that we are eligible to be reimbursed here will cover most or all of our potential obligations?
I don't know that I have an exact answer for you, but the majority of these cases were not heard at the municipal court level. So it was only after the Blake decision that the majority of these cases came to municipal court for consideration. So I know that is something that Ms. Welch, our court administrator, is evaluating.
Yeah, it's important to note that before Blake, a lot of the possession cases were Class C felonies, so I would venture to say that the vast majority of them happen at a county court as opposed to a municipal court. So, but it is a good question. And
well, I guess, yeah, that makes me wonder, what convictions are we refunding money for? Because the felonies were all Superior Court.
yeah, we don't have a number on that.
I think there's work being done right now looking at this. I know that Ms. Welch was aware that this general conversation was happening, but we sort of got this contract sent to us like, hey, here's some money, sign this contract. So there's still some legwork being done to see how the city can use this opportunity for reimbursement best.
And it'll at least cover the staff time to research that part. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Walters. Anything else?
No, I mean, if somebody wants to give us money, let's sign the contract
Yeah.
that allows them to do that. It's still just kind of curious.
All right, well, this is a discussion with possible action. Looking for some possible action.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks. I would be, curious if and when we find out, if staff could let us know, just so we have an idea. But that, I don't think that in any way impedes our desire to authorize the contract. So I move that City Council authorizes the mayor to execute this interlocal cooperative agreement between the City of Anacortes and Administrative Office of the Courts.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Ms. Hubick to authorize Mayor to sign the interlocal agreement between the Office of Administrative Courts and the City of Anacortes as presented. Any further discussion? And yes, I'm also curious about the information, if we have any, that we need to be concerned with in our court system. All right, Mr.
Mayor
Francilla.
Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I guess one question, as with respect to the budget, have we built this revenue into the 2023 budget?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No, I'm getting the no from our finance director.
That strikes me as prudent, since maybe we're not even eligible for a lot of reimbursement. But.
There you go. All right, any further discussion? Mr. Franciac, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. On to item 7B, Capital Facilities Plan, Public Works Project. This is a discussion item, and we're still hopefully working most of the bugs out of OpenGov. We're starting to warm up to it a little bit more. And we've got the crack public works staff standing by to answer any questions you might have that come up. But one of the really good things about OpenGov is it does have that, the details. The challenge of OpenGov is digging through it to get to those details. So when you have questions about, hey, why is this particular project in the capital facilities plan, and you click on the details, I have implored the staff to do a nice job of getting those details in there. So again, so we can have hopefully an 8-minute discussion rather than an 8-hour discussion over the capital facilities plan would be maybe one good outcome of having that kind of material in. But with that, now that we're set up and the public works staff is coming up forward to be ready to answer all your hard questions, Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. Very excited about this, kicking off our CFP, kind of kicking off the whole budget season now, but and doing it within OpenGov. So it's very exciting for us, and I'm sure it's exciting for you as well. Just kind of an overlay of what we're going to be looking at tonight. So just a reminder, this is just for public works projects tonight. So we have the Public Works Department here. Next week we'll be looking at the governmental funds. So there is some overlap. Parks, some of the other departments do public works projects, but they're not part of the Public Works Department. So, but we'll walk through that tonight. So we'll start out looking at the 2023 to 2028 department category. So these are reports that Philip has set up. He's done a really nice job with this implementation. He's been the point of contact and the lead on this from the beginning, and has really done a nice job. But we'll look at, so just a quick look at the overall, and then a quick look at the 2023 by department. That'll be the entire CFP for 2023, and then we'll drill down into those 2023 public works departments at a detailed level. And please ask questions as we go. Be happy to entertain any questions. The total of all 6 years of the CFP is $273.8 million. And so you'll see this in a little bit, but this is, I was excited, so I screenshot these and I put them on the, anyway, it's really turning out nice. It's got really nice graphics, and you can see here how easy this is to look at. You can, there's different graphing options. This is the bar chart option, obviously, and then you see all 6 years of the CFP with the totals down below. So we'll start here, and then we'll jump into 2023, and then we'll get into more details. So. All right.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and staff. So, as Mr. Hoagland mentioned, this is the 2023 to 2028 CFP. I'm going to stay on the we'll stay on the graph to begin with, and this shows you the biggest blocks. This is by CFP category, as we've traditionally defined them, such as transportation, water, general government, and so forth. I hope that you've all been able to access the software. These reports are all in the reports folder, and this is actually new as of today, so after this you'll be able to play around with it some more. But as we go through the implementation, we're learning how to use the software better and how to display the information in the best possible way to provide the most clarity and information. This, of course, is my favorite view, the grid, since it's a spreadsheet type. You can see by year, the column is the year, and then by row is the individual department categories. When we get to adopting the CFP, we'll be adopting it as a complete CFP, 23 to 28. But because 2023 affects our next year and our next year's budget, which is adopted separately, we're going to focus in on that tonight. This is the view of just the 2023 projects. And so we have, obviously, you all know, we have a big sewer project and we have a big water project planned for next year. And this is the grid format for 2023.
So again, for council, if you've got any questions, it probably makes sense to go ahead and just chime in, because as we move through there, I'm a fan of the pie graph on this one, just so you know, because it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Park.
Thank you. So, Mr. Stefan, can you drill down a little bit? Say, like, pick the water project and get into the details a little bit more from here.
That's the kind of question I was looking for.
Yes, thank you. This is all of the water projects for the 2023 year, and this is the dollar amount. They don't quite all fit on here. So.
And then can you drill down even further? Say if you want to look at, I don't know, decommission the retired WTP. Could you click on that and get into a further level of detail?
Yeah, you can't quite. Can you click on that to get to the details? I don't think that works that way yet. But go
that's
for it.
How I would have built it. You can't click here, but I can go into the details.
We all would have built it that way.
So I'm going over to the budgets section, and from there we can go into the detail on that project.
Yeah, major flaw in the program there. So you can't go from reports, you have to go through budgets to get to that detail. Because I've been hyping the detail, so we better make sure council knows how to get to that awesome detail.
Yeah, so if you missed what I did there is I pulled up the CFP and then I sorted by the 2023 column and also searched for water, and that's how we got to this decommissioning one. There's 3 boxes of information that can be entered here for the departments. This is a fairly straightforward project that we're required to do, so there's not that much detail here. I'm happy to jump back and forth now from the detailed view to the overview if there are more questions.
Just briefly, I wanted to point out, none of the projects that we have listed in the CFP in Public Works have any debt associated with them. So we're, any of the funding here is all either through existing cash reserves or future receipts.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thanks. Is there a place where we get to see the funding sources?
There is. It's a matter of finding it.
Very good question. So there's a couple of different ways to look at the funding sources for our projects. What I've pulled up here is essentially the state bars code, the type of money that we're receiving for 2023. This is, again, the overview of it, and then we can look at the individual project level as well. The other view would be looking at a broader revenue type. This is a more general view at that revenue. And then if we were looking at water, so at the saved view over here, I'm going to go to the 2023 water projects. So this is how those water projects are funded.
You slide it down just a little bit so we can see the top of it. There we go.
Although that's not looks like it's missing a revenue line on there. From within the project, we can also look here under revenues. And this comes from capital contributions for this specific project. The software is, the way it's designed and supposed to work is at the high level view. So we look at the large categories, we look at the broader level of the total. And especially with the utility projects, there's not that much detail since the revenue sources are typically just the utility rates and or the money that has been saved from utility rates.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
Do you have a cheat sheet as to what you call the funding sources? So for instance, that there was capital contributions. I think elsewhere we have grants, we might have donations, and I seem to recall that they're named things that are non-obvious to non-accountants.
That's a good question. We were trying to find a way to do that, for example, to explain it. I think there was an opportunity in the details sheet, maybe. I don't want to put you on the spot, but because, grants being exactly that, and then utility capital reserve, for example, being able to separate those out, I realize it is important for council to see that.
Yeah, I don't have a cheat sheet or a legend to go with this, but that's an excellent idea that I can add on to this.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I think it would be great too if we had a little, like a screenshot with highlights or circles of how you got here. That might be asking a lot too. That's kind of an IT question, I think, more than an accounting question. But it could be really helpful for the public as well.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Walters?
and I would encourage Mr. Steffen to move my face anywhere else. I also am not seeing, when I log into the site, the same type of interface that you are. So I'm having difficulty that way, and we don't have to resolve that now. Maybe I'll give you a call later. But I'm not able to click on the same things. I don't have that left column list of filters and views, and I don't see the reports named quite the same thing that you do. So I'm still having difficulty.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. Council does have a little bit of a restricted view at this point, since you don't have access to the operating side of things. You'll see a few things differently. But when you click on reports, the view I have here is the grid view over on the right-hand side. You can change that to this grid view, and you would be seeing anything that has my organization on what I see. And if that's not the case, yes, I'm happy to help you out at a different time.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Moulton had a suggestion or a request. I didn't quite catch that. I was hoping she could repeat that.
Yeah, about the circle. Yeah. Can you go ahead and try to give that another shot at it, Ms. Moulton?
Sure, thanks. So sometimes at my other job, the IT person will take a screenshot and then do like kind of circle of how you get there, the descending order of first you click here and then you click there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Basically, if you want to get to the details of the decommission of the retired water treatment plant, how do you do that? Step one, you hit reports or you hit budgets and you circle that, and then once you're in that, you hit so on. And if you want to see how we're financing that, you go to this one and to this one. I think did I summarize that close?
Yes, and even if we can't have it to that degree with like a screenshot type thing, even sort of just a list of go here, then here, like just a list of where you go next, if that's possible.
Yeah.
So we could just use it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm capturing what council want. I mean, obviously I want you to be able to see everything in here, but I'm thinking that's what you're interested in. What year is this happening? How is it being funded? What are some of the details behind it?
So I think then just kind of tip sheets then on how to drill into some of those details. Yep, no problem.
Since we are doing the CFP budget and not really trying to do open gov, Mr. Hoagland, do you want to walk through each of the departments?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. So let's go through. Since we're on water, let's start with water and work through those. Each of those projects that we have scheduled for 2023. So decommissioning of the old water treatment plant, estimated at $12.5 million. I mentioned earlier we don't have debt scheduled for any of this. We do have cash reserves set aside. If this estimate holds true, we should be in good shape with our existing cash reserves to pay for that.
Let me interrupt real quick, and just for council, since we don't necessarily have the perfect drill down to the details, we do have the experts in the room for those of you who can't see them. So if you got any specific questions on these, that's hopefully what we're here for.
That next line, retail pipeline replacement, that's the standard 1.5 to 1.6 that we schedule every year for in-city pipeline work, replacing old cracked lines. The hydro excavator at 650,000.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I guess I would like to know how we should be stepping through these projects to look at them individually. Should that be on the budgets tab, looking at the 2023 through 2028 CFP budgets report, or whatever category it's called in the budgets tab?
Yeah, that's a good question for our OpenGov expert.
Yeah, so you should be able to see this 2023 budget, or 2023 to 2028 CFP, and then within there are each of these projects. I've used the search feature at the top to drill down into...
I don't know if Mr. Walters is seeing that, because we're seeing your picture on the... Are you seeing the screen, Mr. Walters?
I am now.
Okay, there we go.
So I've used this water system up here as a drill down. It does pick up some of the wastewater ones, but if you are following along this way, you could click on the hydro excavator, for example, which is the line that we were at. And here there's a description of what the background to this project is, an analysis.
So I think to answer his question, budget is the way to go, to drill down.
So I guess, would you like me to just read through this, or would it be easier to have Mr. McDaniel give a brief update?
I think you go through there and council stuff, like we did in the old days, we would just kind of go page by page through there, and if council's got any questions about any specific items, then we'll turn it over to the experts.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Before we leave this screen, if you scroll to the top, you've got expenses and revenue. And tell me how to see how this project is funded.
So click on the revenue link there, and then click on this non-recurring line on the bottom of that illustration, and that brings up this line item, capital contributions. So the way we schedule our water rates, we have two components, one for operating costs and one for capital costs. So when it says capital contributions, those are that portion of our water rates that gets set aside for capital projects that we have in our CFP. So this is a regional project, so it's shared by the other 6 wholesale customers in that cost.
Okay. Well, I think I've kind of gotten the hang of finding some of this stuff, but holy smokes, it's a lot of clicks to get to this data.
Yeah. Yes, that's what we're finding as well.
If there's no more other questions on the hydro excavator, we can go down to the system security. 650,000 scheduled for 2023. You'd like to see details on that, or if that all makes sense. I suspect most of these are familiar to council. Please let us know if you want to drill down into any of these. The next project down, it's another regional project. So in the project title, when it says regional, that means it's a part of the water treatment plant or a part of the transmission lines that run from the water treatment plant over to Sharp's Corner, essentially. And those projects are shared in cost by the city of Anacortes and the other 6 wholesale customers. So that's regional project at $625,000. We share those costs based on consumption, and the city's consumption of the whole system is about 12%. So when you see a number like that, you think of our retail customers having to pay for about 12% of that $625,000.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Walters.
stepping back up a little bit on the retail pipeline replacements project. The description of that project indicates no change and continuation of our annual replacement. I wonder if the high-profile failures that we have had in our distribution system this year, and assumingly this is part of that, have triggered any need for us to evaluate whether we're spending enough per year to maintain our aging pipe infrastructure.
Yeah, based on the at least three failures recently of our asbestos concrete pipes, you're asking, did we step it up in 2023? Maybe that's time for our public works.
Or should we?
Or should we? Yep. All right. Mr. McDaniel, why don't you step up and try to tackle that one?
Thank you. So, as you recall, we are working through, if you look down through this list of capital projects, we are also working on our water system plan update. And so we kind of went with a hold flat model with the pipeline replacements for this year, so until we can get that water system plan update completed. What that does in that water system plan update is it will provide us a capital improvement planning tool that we're really excited of launching in 23. So we kind of held a flat line for the 2023 pipeline replacements in that category.
And that water system plan update wouldn't be seen in the capital facilities plan?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. I guess coming soon is the answer in short, right?
Yeah, yes it is, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I interpret that as, anecdotal, although real, 3 failures, but we're having a serious plan that I know council approved a while ago. It's a fairly pricey and extensive plan looking at everything to make sure we prioritize appropriately various water lines. So I think that makes sense.
Okay, so I think we were at the electrical switching gear replacement. That's another regional project, $625,000. The next one down, that's a retail project. When you see retail in the name, that's specific to the in-city system, so that's within the city limits. So that's that entire cost is borne by the city retail rates, $500,000. The next project down is refinery. So as we've been talking about this, we have a regional system, we have a retail system, we also have a refinery system. There are 2 lines that run off of the main transmission line that serve the refineries only. So there's that segment of the system we collect from the refineries from those future projects. So that's how this will be funded. The city does have a few customers up there, so we share in that cost a little bit. It's primarily refinery funded though. Pass Lake 10-inch water line, repair and replace at $400,000. So Oak Harbor, that's another system within our water system, runs from Sharps Corner out to Deception Pass Bridge. Again, the city has a number of customers on that line as well, so we share in those costs, but it's primarily an Oak Harbor related cost, and we collect additional capital charges from Oak Harbor for those projects.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
On the AMI, the metering infrastructure, do we anticipate that $500,000, which is programmed just for 2023, is all in the total amount that we need to complete that project, including the meters, including the antennas, including the software that can be, all pieces of that?
I'm getting a head nod yes. But Mr. McDaniel, just to make sure, because I have the same question, but I'm excited about this project.
Great question, and thank you. So this is where we brought forward the AMI project. We scheduled that out over several years. So I believe if we click on this project, we can see the next years and phasing of that for that funding. But the $500,000 is part of that project for 2023. The work is going to happen in 2023. And then as we move into 24, and 25, we've added those additional for the total overall cost of that project. Great question.
And we've already spent a decent amount in that's the other challenge is, it's hard. We don't have OpenGov for 2022 for CFP.
Looking forward to next year.
Yeah.
But yes, the majority of those products and progression with that project, like the software was purchased up front. One antenna at City Hall will be installing additional antennas throughout, and then updating the meters themselves of different progression along the way.
So that the total cost of the project is not easily seen then here in the software. You've got to drill down into the revenues and then the non-recurring, and then you got to scroll across year to year.
I'm going to defer that to my wonderful finance department.
And I'm not looking on the same view there. I'm looking on the budget view so I can see the details. Okay, I think I follow. So the total cost of that project is 1.5 plus whatever we've already spent. Which is 2 million?
I don't think it's that much, but I don't know.
1.5, but we can see.
Right, but the question was, what have we already spent? I mean, we know we already have some of these meters out there, and we already know we have an antenna on the roof, and we already know that council approved the contract for some things. So do we know what we've spent so far?
I don't have the precise number in front of me right now. So part of that was funded in 22, and we could look back and come up with that, but I can't at my fingertips right now. I can follow up with that if you would like.
All right. Yeah, and maybe that's an opportunity to put it in the details, continuation of a system and some of the expenses that are already in, if that makes sense to council.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Yes, I think that makes great sense, especially with some of our, well, I don't want to specify which, I was thinking larger dollar projects, but anyway, if there are places that it's appropriate to put what we've already spent, I know that's extra work. But.
Yeah, as we're especially since we're transitioning from spreadsheets and PDFs in our CFP to a full on OpenGov. I think if we can have a little history in there would help. Doesn't have to be a novel, just a couple of lines of 2022 partial system install, etc., and cost. Got it. All right, we're ready to move on to wastewater, or we have any more questions on our
sorry,
water?
I think we...
Anything jumping out at council that you want to ask our crack team on?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
I also just realized we do have the CFP from, with 2022 numbers somewhere. We could look that up ourselves if we're that curious. I'm trying not to make extra work for.
Yeah, appreciate it as we're working our way through it. But again, for some of these major projects, this one's a pretty cool one. So I like the staff to sell it.
Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, it could get kind of unwieldy if we had a long history of each of those that we already know it's in our PDF versions of a CFP. We'll try to find the right balance.
So as we drop down this list of projects in the water utility, this next project at $350,000, phase 4 and 5 treatment plant controls reliability. And then you can see we're starting to get into some of these, the smaller projects that, per the criteria of our CFP, we need to include here. They exceed $20,000 in our capital in nature. But please let me know if you want to dig into any of these further. But this one at $350,000 is a regional project. The next one down, various maintenance projects at $350,000. This next one down, that's part of the retail system, the Fidalgo Island service area that we're taking over, telemetry. The next one at 300,000, reservoir internal maintenance.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
On the controls reliability upgrade, is that a major component and the final component of that project? Because it seems to me that we've talked about that for quite a few years, and it seemed to me that it was pretty critical that it get done when we started talking about it. What generally is our status on it? Are we 90% done and this is the last bit, or are we just getting started?
Great question, and thank you. That is exactly the last phase of that. As far as the criticality, we started with the most critical and the highest priority along that backbone upgrade for those controls for the pumps and the pumping system at the water treatment plant, and this is the final stage of that. We've gone through a couple of refinements with that and been able to trim that project down considerably, so we came back with this $350,000 to complete that work of that, and it is the final stage of that reliability.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for our water treatment? All right. I think we can probably move on to whatever you're going to pick next to try to flow through. Looks like wastewater.
Wastewater.
Right. I think council knows about the outfall. That's the big one. And you're in reports now as opposed to budgets, looking at these.
Yeah, reports CFP by department category. So wastewater projects. So the first one up, the treatment plant outfall, 19.5 million scheduled for 2023 now. An additional 4 million the following year in 2024. We have various funding sources set up for that. We still have proceeds from a bond issue that we are holding on to that will be used for that project, as well as FEMA funding that has been lined up.
And I think if you actually go into the revenue sources here, you would see something to the words to that effect. If I recall. I know he's going fast. I'm sure you're taking notes on how to get there, but there we go.
Yeah, so two different primary categories there, 16 million in grant funding, and then 3.5 million next year, 4 million the following year in utility revenues. The next project down is wastewater treatment plant solids handling, 200,000 scheduled for next year, 500,000 the following years. Next project down is out the end of the CFP. Sewer line, $9 million scheduled in 27 from Leverix to 6th Street. The next line down is similar to the water system. We have 1.5 million scheduled each year for maintenance of the sewer lines. Reservation Road out at the end of the CFP, several $1 million scheduled. Let me know if you'd like to dig into that. The next line down, various maintenance and repair projects, starting at around 350 next year, increasing 25,000 a year. Sanitary sewer collection system, pump station upgrades, 252,000 scheduled next year, and then increasing slightly each year after that. Replacing bar screens and upgrade grit handling system. That project's going to start next year in 23 at 50,000, then 1.25 million the following year in 2024. Pump Station 4 upgrade scheduled to start next year at 50,000, finishing up the following year with an additional 750,000. Influent pumping upgrade scheduled for 2024. Sanitary sewer collection system, Pump Station 3 upgrade starting next year at 50,000, 500,000 the following year. Pump Station 16 upgrade, 500,000 in 2024. And then effluent pump station upgrade in 2024 at 500,000. Dewatering facility is scheduled next year to be built at 500,000. Basin rehab at 400,000 next year in 2023. At the wastewater treatment plant again in 2024, incinerator preheat unit at 300,000. Septic handling facility upgrade next year at 250,000. Nutrient removal upgrade starting next year at 20,000, 50,000 the next 2 years in 24 and 25. Re-roofing the secondary building at the wastewater plant out in 2025. Solids handling building re-roof in 2026. Re-roofing the headworks building in 2025. That's what we have for wastewater.
All right, and I'll save you the question because I know it's out there. Maintenance, long-term, very expensive maintenance of a plant that works very well, thanks to all the great work by the folks that work over there. But yeah, there is a lot of maintenance costs that continues, and we're evaluating. I think you can see that in the 2027 out years of the big number way at the top of looking at a future plant. I think that's that number but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Becky, probably. So we're looking at the maintenance versus the new potential new plant.
Mr. Mayor and
Yeah.
Council, the higher numbers out in 2027 and 2028, those are for sewer line extensions and looking at the solids handling part of the treatment process, not the entire treatment plant, but
Gotcha.
the solids handling, the incinerator, what to do with that in the future.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Two questions, and they're both about that. One is about solids handling. I wonder how accurate some of these. No, I mean they kind of look like dartboard numbers. Do we need to spend more up front in order to get an answer to the question of what it is we're going to do with solids handling? Is that really the number out in 2028, or is that a realistic expectation for dealing with that? That seems to me to be a really big question mark. Obviously, we've got the outfall, but that's mostly paid for, so that's a big question. And then the sewer line extension from Lovericks to 6th Street. There's no description in here about why that is necessary, or really what that is, or what purpose it serves, other than maybe providing service to Lovericks. And the revenues are just shown as sewer revenues. So
all right.
I need more information.
Well, we got all the right people here to, well, see if you want to take a shot at that one.
The sewer line to Lovericks has been in the CFP for a few years now. As we move forward, that project may or may not happen.
And then on the accuracy of the $15 million number in 2028?
For the solids handling, there's
Yeah.
5 million in 2027 and
Okay.
15 million in 2028. We'll have a better idea of actual costs once we evaluate, take a close look at the alternatives, which we've done in the past, but trying to sort out what alternatives we want to move forward with, and then do an engineering study. And then we should have a better idea of what the actual costs will be. The rough off-the-cuff costs have been 20 million from an engineer.
Gotcha.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
So, especially given the uncertainty around that key component of the wastewater treatment plant, the $9 million sewer line to 6th Street, I still need more information about that as to whether it should remain in the CFP. Do we have a failed sewer line that we're replacing? Is it a new sewer line? Does it serve everybody on 6th Street? What is our what is our real description of this project? Because it's not in the text in the proposal details screen.
All right, well, we'll have Mr. Holman kind of come up and see what he's got for you.
Thank you, Mayor Miller, members of the council. I think that has been programmed, like Becky said, for a couple of years. Mr. Walters, that's a new sewer line to support the potential of redevelopment in that neighborhood. It flows easterly towards the plant from Lovricks as not necessarily a property, but a identifier of an endpoint to help future development in that area. It also runs vaguely along the railroad, the former railroad. So if that helps you understand where that's running down at the bottom of the bluff and able to collect gravity sewer from the hillside up above.
And does that provide service to everybody up gradient from Lovricks?
Sorry, say that again?
Does that help support the sewer system generally? Does it eliminate a pump station where we have one today? I mean,
I think that was
future development should be paying for its own sewer line. We should not be paying for that out of sewer revenues. So that's, to me, not a sufficient justification for a $9 million project.
So I think that was one of the things that was looked at when that was initially programmed was what could be done from the standpoint of pump station reduction, as well as the potential of storage within that same corridor to help with the problems of I&I in the system.
Oh, yes, I recall that discussion. But also I thought that we had been told, I mean, I'm on the Public Works Committee, I thought that we'd been told that we'd looked at that and determined that wasn't viable as effective storage to solve the outflow problem that we have occasionally.
I think that staff is looking to keep the options open. That's why they've pushed that out. That's why we've pushed that out in the further range, so that we can keep that potential open.
Yeah, good questions. I think we could use a little more detail probably in the remarks if council wants to keep that in the CFP.
Mayor Miller.
And Mayor Miller?
Yep, Mr. Walters and then Mr. McDougall.
The reason I highlight this one, number one, it's a big number. But also because it's a big number, and if we leave it in the CFP, assumedly at some point we're going to recalculate rates, and the sewer rates are going to be based on the projects that we need to be able to fund. If this is a project that is worthwhile, then great. If this isn't a project that has a compelling justification that it should be removed from the CFP, we shouldn't use it to calculate rates, and rates should thus be lower as a result. So these projects are not meaningless when they're shown in the CFP. They have a real effect on people's pocketbooks. And I think we ought to keep that in mind as we evaluate the justifications for them.
And my understanding is sewer rates, remind me, Mr. Hoagland, 2024 revert to CPI for sewer rates. I think that was council voted. Yeah, we adjusted the sewer rate based on the study, and then those will expire 2024 and go to a CPI inflator.
Right, 2024 is the last year of the scheduled increase.
Okay, so
And then-
technically 2025 is when we would go to a CPI inflator. So that's another thing for council to think about. If you indeed want to tie those to exact projects, then maybe we reevaluate the inflator. So all good points. Mr. McDougall, sorry.
Yeah, just a quick addition on that particular project, on the detail. It sounds like it would serve some of the neighborhoods, I guess, to the south of Oaks Avenue along there. And if we could just get a sense for the geography in that project, like how many blocks up the hill, how far east-west, like is it Baltimore to Georgia, et cetera, something like that. Thank you.
All right, any other wastewater questions? All right, I think you can move on to what was next? Transportation. There's hardly any money in that one. Yikes.
So the first project scheduled in 2023, well, the first project on the list there, $20 million a year for 3 years for Phase 2 of South Commercial Avenue. The next one down, annual pavement maintenance. You'll see in 2023 we have $2.4 million scheduled. There is going to be a little bit of rollover from 2022 that we will have not spent rollover into 2023, so a little bit higher plan for next year. Fidalgo Bay reconstruction, a couple of years there in 2025 and 2027, $1 million and $8.5 million. Our Avenue Safety and Mobility, that $5.4 million in 2023, all scheduled for next year. That's primarily grant funded with a match that will be paid out of impact fees. Women's Channel Trail out in 2027 at $3.5 million. South March Point 2027, $2.5 million. 17th and Q out in 2025 at $2 million. Phase 1 South Commercial Avenue, $500,000 scheduled for next year, $1.5 million scheduled for 2024. And that's the section 11th to 13th. Kansas Avenue at 1.2 out in 2027 at this point. Continuing with the $200,000 per year for sidewalks and trip hazards. 12th and K out in 2027 at $1 million. Oaks Avenue sidewalks out in 2026 for $1 million. 88 ramps continuing with that program. We've been budgeting $100,000. We're bumping that to $105,000 next year, and then an additional $5,000 each year after that. The H Avenue ACFL connector, it's a sidewalk project from 41st Street up to the trailhead up towards Heart Lake, $200,000 next year. Non-motorized improvements, we typically budget that at $10,000. We're bumping that to $10,500, and then an additional $500 each year after that. And that's it in transportation.
And I think for some of these big numbers, that's the revenue source is kind of the interesting part. For example, the 11th and 13th, I know we've had a number of discussions about that roundabout, but that is state grant funded. So that's not money that we're pulling from any of our overlay funds, for example.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
One of the projects, 12th Street and K Avenue, do we know anything more about what we're talking about doing there? It says alleviate dangerous left-hand turn.
Oh, okay. Mr. Holmans, he's ready to jump all over this one, so you don't have to dig to the details on it on OpenGov.
Yeah, so that's a program that, or a project that's contained within the comprehensive plan. That's a result of the traffic analysis that was provided. So that identifies a capacity as well as some safety issues at a growing left turn. So I think there's that project is in there because it's in the comprehensive plan. I think there's not yet a funding strategy. I think that's eligible for grants, I think we'll look at it from a grant standpoint. So,
But then if you take it out, then you won't be able to apply for the grants.
that's exactly right. So that's
So
in there.
that's one of the
as-
challenges with having, identifying the funding.
Exactly. So it's identified as a problem, no current funding source, but it's in there to provide the potential.
The funding source that's identified is traffic impact fees.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, which would be standard availability for any project that's within the comprehensive plan.
And $1 million, does that buy us a roundabout? Is that what we're thinking at that location?
I think in 2027, a roundabout for $1 million would be a smoking deal. So I think we're probably looking at some left turn lane type traffic control.
And does that cost $1 million?
I think when there's more work done on that project, I think I'd have a better answer. I think that's a speculative number at the moment.
All right, any other questions on the transportation's CFP portion? Mr. McDougall.
Quick one on 17th and Q, and I apologize if somebody asked because I was digging through another one. Is that one primarily like kind of widening and those kinds of, that kind of work, or is there actual like roundabout
Yeah,
potentially
so
there?
17th and Q is a current signalized intersection. It's going to be one of the primary egress points to the MJB project. So I think that's programmed as a roundabout.
As a roundabout,
Yeah.
okay, cool, thanks.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
If you look at the Fidalgo Bay Road reconstruction project, the description of that project under recommendation, but I understand that the headings were limited in what we can do with headings.
Yeah.
It says that the Samish Indian Nation is interested in pursuing grant funding to reconstruct Fidalgo Bay Road. And I just point this out as an illustration of it being very useful to include some of this data in the project description. I would actually go further off the record to say we're not going to build this project out of city funds because it's so expensive and has such a limited impact, and we just don't have the funds available. Maybe it's not desirable to put that into the CFP when we're going after grant funding, but that type of information I think is critical to City Council because we do need to make choices here at some point as to which projects we include and which we don't, and which we choose to fund with impact fees and which we don't. And so we need to know that, you know, like it says here, that somebody else is looking for funding for us. And I have some experience with this. I know that there is a fairly good chance that they can probably get at least design money for it. But for other projects, we do need to know pretty upfront, you know, where the possible grant funds may be coming from and the likelihood of achieving that, because otherwise it's hard to know. You know, if you say that project is going to be funded by impact fees or not, that we should be making those choices and prioritizing those projects over others.
Yep, to your first point, I'll agree with it. Analysis, recommendation, and whatever the title of that first one, you know, doesn't really help us. But your point about the funding, I think I was, you know, we wanted to make sure to capture in this case that indeed was not, you know, a priority for city funding, but we would help facilitate the grant acquisition.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Holman.
I want to also indicate another thing that OpenGov does really well that I found helpful when preparing some of this, and that's the priority number that's up there, right there where Philip's circling it. So I think maybe I'll let one of the accountants explain what those are, but they did a very good job of explaining to us what those priorities were, and that helped us, and then I think that's a pretty essential piece of information.
Yeah, the finance staff did spend a good amount of time discussing what those priorities meant. Obviously, it's hopefully a tool to help council identify those priorities. as we learn more about OpenGov. But did you want to take a stab at that, Mr. Hoagland?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. When you look at the drop-down box, there's actually 10 options. So we actually, Philip and Mayor and I kind of walked through this to identify the use of 5. So we have a 5-tiered priority system. So we can email this out too, so you have it. I apologize, I didn't think about it ahead of time. But a priority 1, the description of that would be it's critical need and resources are available to do the project. A priority 2 is a project that is necessary and we do have available resources to do the project. Priority 3, it's a necessary project, but resources are not currently available. Priority 4 would be a project that's nice to have and we have resources available. Priority 5 would be a nice to have, resources not available. So I think critical is pretty obvious. Description 2 would be probably a road project that we need to accommodate growth and we have grant funding lined up to pay for it. Priority 3, a necessary project. Similarly, we need that project to accommodate growth, but we don't have those resources lined up yet. Nice to have and resources available. I think a good example is the skate park. Resources are lined up for that, so that's going to be coming next year. And then 5, nice to have, still trying to find resources.
And I would, it's far from a perfect system, but again, it's a tool in OpenGov, and we thought we'd experiment with it. Because again, real challenge is something like we would all much rather have commercial from 14th to 23rd overlaid before we mess with a roundabout at 12th and Commercial in front of Safeway. However, we have the funds to do that because the state granted us those funds. So, that kind of moves it up in priority. And much like the skate park, it's not like you're going to, you've got to put staff resources on it when somebody shows up with $900,000. Even though we all might have, council, you might have a higher priority, but the reality is those dollars aren't always aligned exactly with our priorities. But it's something that happy to discuss. But 10 priorities would be insane, in my opinion, as we're learning this together. It's OpenGov. All right, transportation. Any more to discuss here? I think we got a couple more categories.
Yeah, so that was it for transportation. The storm sewer is pretty easy. 210,000 scheduled next year, 220 the following year, 231. So it increases a little bit each year, but there's no specific outfall projects. It's just continuing pond maintenance, things of that nature. Likewise, sanitation is pretty straightforward. We budget $45,000 each year to buy new dumpsters to replace the ones that are rusting out and aging. The only other public works project we have in here that we haven't covered yet is the facilities budget, and that's within the general government because it's part of the general fund. You may remember we have been funding that at about $600,000 per year. We use REIT 1 to fund that. Next year we have that budgeted at $300,000 for 2023, and then the following years back up to $600,000. Again, REIT 1 funded. That's what we have for public works projects. I would be happy to answer questions or if you have further thoughts.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Under the storm projects, I see that we have just a pretty modest amount of money programmed and just a catch-all restoration and upgrades project. I am aware of existing capacity constraints in the stormwater system. I thought that some of those projects to alleviate those constraints were listed in prior CFPs, but I'll admit I didn't go back and look today. Though some of those constraints in our stormwater system, where you have a smaller pipe than is necessary to convey the water from a larger pipe that is upstream, are constraints on additional housing development. It makes it more difficult for development to occur because of downstream, way off-site stormwater constraints in the system. So I wonder if we shouldn't be calling out those projects here in the CFP, listing them, and finding funding in the storm utility to make those upgrades. And I wonder, I would invite any Public Works comment on that.
All right, Mr. Holman's back up. I think the question is, the previous CFPs, I think I might remember that we had some specific storm system restorations, but I'll let Mr. Holman.
I think when we're going off of memory, I agree with you, Mayor Miller. I think there are some capacity system upgrades that were programmed on the old spreadsheet system in the years, what do we call it, 7 through 20, I think is what it used to say. I'm not sure where we're able to do that with the transition to OpenGov, if that's a thing anymore. But I think there's multiple capacity system upgrades programmed out there because there's not a plan in place for a funding source. So I think that's one of the things that we'd like to do with our new Public Works Director is evaluate some of those importance of those and propose a rate structure that helps support those.
Are there ever grant opportunities to upgrade stormwater system? I mean, I know that there are grant opportunities for connecting low-income housing to utilities. I don't know that those stormwater upgrades would fit nicely into such a bucket. But looking at the old CFP, we have $9 million in out-year projects and almost all of them are capacity improvements. Or at least several $1 million of them are capacity improvements, eliminating those constraints. I think it's worthwhile getting on that sooner rather than later so that we have that information in the CFP. We can be looking for money for it. We can all be aware of those projects. And ideally, we would be using OpenGov and the information contained here as the single version of the truth on these projects so that everybody is operating off the same sheet of music. And so we as council members, members of the public, all know that these things are out there and are unfunded liabilities that we need to figure out funding for.
And like you mentioned before, the impact to the rates as well. So, yeah, we need to take a turn on the stormwater CFP, I think. Make sure we're capturing everything.
Before we leave, there are a couple other things in general government I forgot about, so I wanted to revisit that. So you can see, yeah, operations upper parking lot pavement in 2024, we have $260,000 budgeted for that. That's out at the operations shop. And then $230,000 budgeted for a City Hall generator in 2024 as well. EV charging infrastructure, that's out in 2028. $200,000 budgeted for that. Solar panels on the maintenance facility in 2025 at $150,000. And operations facility master plan in 2023 next year at $25,000.
All right. Well, I think that was it for the Public Works portion of the Capital Facilities Plan. Appreciate the inputs. I think we're getting a little bit better at OpenGov, and I appreciate the inputs. Any other last questions for Public Works while we've got them all here and the Capital Facilities Plan in front of us?
Mayor
Okay,
Miller.
Mr. Walters.
The various facilities maintenance projects line item, I think, is 300 in 2023, and then it bumps up to $600,000 in later years, if I saw that correctly when it flashed on the screen here. I'm not comfortable authorizing $600,000 a year on miscellaneous projects. I would feel more comfortable if you have $600,000 in expenses, each of which are $40,000 projects or items. I don't think we necessarily need to review every one of those. But if there's a $500,000 project, it ought to be called out separately, and we should be evaluating it. So I wonder if there ought to be a cap, maybe equivalent to the mayor's contract authority, on the individual projects done there. Because as you might recall, it was only a couple of years ago that we rehabbed the entire operations building outside of council's review to the tune of several $100,000. And that kind of thing occurs because we have these buckets like this.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion on the the facilities maintenance projects and trying to consolidate those. And yeah, it's an excellent point. All right, anything else? Well, with that, I will adjourn the October 3rd City Council meeting. Thank you very much.